Hi everyone, Gundam Facts here for a 28th and brand new episode of our special edition Lore of the Universal Century. Today we're going to the UC-90s in an attempt to answer a particular question, which is... Yep, in this video we are going to explore all the variants of the Ra Cailum-class battleship, how much they differ from the regular model, when did they appear, and extract every bit of mechanical knowledge we have on them so far. But let's start by the beginning. What is exactly the Ra Cailum-class? A command-use space battleship developed by the Earth Federation forces, the Ra Cailum was an entire line of ships, serving as the spearhead of the Federation for most of the late UC. Introduced in UC-93 by Vic Wellington, the infamously known manufacturer of the Magellan and Salamis lines, the Ra Cailum was developed alongside the Club-class light cruiser, with their goal being to serve as the new generation of ships of the Earth Federation forces. Unlike the Club, which was primarily meant for patrol operations and colony inspections, the Ra Cailum was instead designed from the start as a full-blown capital ship, which size and assets would serve the Federation interests in outer space. A bastard design between the Dogosegir-class battleship and the Alexandria-class autonomous carrier, the Ra Cailum drew its features from the best offered by both designs, resulting in an extremely advanced space battleship. From the Dogosegir, the Ra Cailum mainly retained a very large size, with a total length of 487 meters, which was even longer than the original Dogosegir. This long design didn't hinder the Ra Cailum mobility, which was ensured by 8 next-generation rear engines and enabled the new battleship to engage the enemy at high combat speed, similarly to its main inspiration, the Dogosegir. Its primary asset, its mobile suit launching capacity, also heavily derived from its Dogosegir lineage, with its 2 mobile suit hangars being connected to 2 sideway launching ramps, which were a combination of the primary and secondary catapults of the Dogosegir. In the same vein, the Ra Cailum also retained the use of a rear hangar and recovery deck, although it was this time way longer than the Dogosegir's counterpart. Now, in terms of mobile suit storage, the Ra Cailum could seem to lag behind the Dogosegir, with its hangars being only able to transport 13 mobile suits, or 20 at max capacity, against the 40 mobile suit max capacity of the original Dogosegir. However, this was actually engineered on purpose, as the mobile suit carried by a Ra Cailum could benefit from a large personal space per unit, which would then enable smoother and quicker repairs, as well as adding comfort during launches. Meanwhile, in the firepower field, the Ra Cailum was also a force to be reckoned all the same, following in the footsteps of the Dogosegir. As primary weapons, the ship mounted a total of 5 twin-barreled megaparticle cannons, 2 on the upper front hull, 1 under the bow, and 2 covering the rear side of the ship. In comparison with the Dogosegir, the number of primary cannons of the Ra Cailum could seem laughable, but actually, it didn't mean at all that the ship lacked firepower, quite the contrary. Although it had way more cannons, the Dogosegir suffered from the usual flaw of UC warships, which was that its monstrous beam barrage could not be unleashed too often and for too long, since the barrels of the cannons would end up overheating, requiring the ship to stop firing for a time for these barrels to cool down. In the Ra Cailum case, the flaw was addressed with the addition of 2 long cooling fins, which would evacuate the generated heat while the cannons were still fired, enabling the ship to prolong its beam barrage for way longer than any of its predecessors, resulting in higher firepower. As for its missiles launching capacity, the Ra Cailum remained similar to its forefather, the Magellan-class, mounting a pair of similar 3-tubes missile launchers in the bow, and which could also fire nuclear warheads if need be. On its belly, the Cailum mounted a total of 4 2-tubes missile launchers, and in front of the bridge, a 8-tubes launcher was also installed, in order to better protect the common platform with missile volleys. More interestingly, the Ra Cailum also mounted a hybrid weapon under each launching ramp, which combined a 6-tube missile launcher with a twin-barrel megaparticle cannon inside the same turret, enabling the Ra Cailum to either fire additional volleys of missiles or either rotate these turrets and gain higher frontal beam firepower. When it came to its defensive abilities, the Ra Cailum was also state-of-the-art, mounting a total of 22 twin-barrels anti-air turrets disseminated all over its hull. Unlike earlier Federation naval designs, the Cailum broke with the old tradition to have the anti-air turrets centered around the bridge, but instead divided them all over the ship, with 2 of them being mounted directly on the bridge, 2 in the section in front of the bridge, 8 near the engine section, 4 siding the launching ramps, 2 near the primary megaparticle cannons, and 4 placed on the belly of the ship. This resulted in a more widespread defense extending to the entirety of the ship, which made it less easy to approach and much more unforgiving to bold enemy tactics, as seen in sharp counterattack against the poor Raisin Schneider. As we said earlier, the Ra Cailum was also a daughter ship of the Alexandria, and many of its features were directly inherited from said class. Like the Alexandria, the Ra Cailum made use of independent block sections for its rear engines, a feature inherited from the Musa line, and which enabled the ship to seal off a heavily damaged engine if need be, enabling it to continue operating with the remaining one, while avoiding the damage to spread to the entirety of the ship, something the Salamis line was extremely vulnerable to. Aside that, the Ra Cailum retained the autonomous carrying abilities of the Alexandria class, enabling it to cruise without supplies for extended periods of time, while carrying a reasonable amount of mobile suits with high-quality resupply and repairs, in a quality over quantity approach. This combination of excellent features resulted in the Ra Cailum being an excellent and reliable design, a perfect addition to the long line of Federation's successful naval designs. Now, despite being a bastard form between the Dogose Gear and Alexandria class, the Ra Cailum was also heavily polished by Vic Wellington, who notably used blueprints and references to older autonomous carriers such as the Pegasus class and Argama class to boost the external aspect of the Cailum. This was done to avoid reminiscence of the older Titan ships guilty of various war crimes during the Grips War from impacting the Ra Cailum reputation, but it was also used to improve the Ra Cailum with other successful features. Among these, the Cailum would notably inherit the capacity to have the crew switch from an observation bridge to a battle bridge, a direct development of the retractable bridge of the original Argama. Through these tricks, the Ra Cailum became the third official iteration of the mystical Pegasus line, despite being at its core a Titan ship in design. In early UC-93, the Ra Cailum was finally introduced to the Federation Army, with the only ready ship of the class, the named ship, joining the ranks of the Londo-built Navy as the new flagship, taking the place of the older Nile Argama. In the late UC-90s, plans to produce more Ra Cailum were discussed in the Federation forces, and by the UC-110th, the Ra Cailum had officially entered limited production, becoming the mainstay Federation commander ship of the next century. These Ra Cailums would then become the tip of the spear of the Federation Navy in the crumbling late UC, with the class participating in the unmobile conflict of UC-122, the Cosmo-Babylonia War of UC-123, the First Jovian War of UC-133, and finally, even the Zarska War in UC-153, 60 years after its official introduction. But that's enough setting for today, and now let's take the mighty variants of the Ra Cailum-class. SD Gundam Lore, a tricky-old game for the Windows 95, full of exotic super deformed original mobile suits, both from the early UC as well as the late UC. Yet, among this mess, stands also some unique ships and ground vehicles, among which are certain Ra Cailum variants. Meet the Spirit Base, a special variant of the Cailum class and one of the boarding vehicles the player can access during his playthrough of SD Gundam Lore. A one-of-a-kind ship existing in the later part of the Universal Century, the Spirit Base gets its name from the line of mobile suits it crew as her mothership, which is no other than the Spirit family. Among these stands notably the Spirit Gundam, an enhanced version of the new Gundam mass production type, the Spirit Gun Cannon, a Jigen-derived gun cannon variant, the Spirit Tank, a modified James gun with a victory tank arms mounting a Einerad, and finally the Spirit Jim, a Jim type descending from the J-gun but including gun easy technology. As a bonus, the ship also crews the Spirit Fighter, a vast improvement of the original G-Fighter designed to support the rest of the Spirit family. Now about the ship itself. If one looks carefully at the Spirit Base, one can notice the rear engine section of the ship, which is different than its regular brethren and is strikingly similar to the Reinforced class, with resembling engine blocks, rear fins, and shorter cooling fins, although the shorter fins could just be induced by the super deformed format. These could potentially mean the Spirit Base is to the Ra Cailum what the Reinforced is to the Clop, an improved variant with a modernization of the fins and better overall cruising abilities. Now, in terms of firepower, the Spirit Base has also a notable variation from the average Ra Cailum, with the 3 tubes missiles launchers of the bow having been replaced by a pair of 2 tubes megaparticle cannons, offering way higher frontal firepower at the cost of some of its missiles launching capacity. Now I know what the G-Generation enjoyers are going to say. Why include the Spirit Base in the Cailum video but not the Carry Base in the Club video? Well, there is actually a drastic difference between the two. The Carry Base, while based on the Space Arc and being technically a Club variant, does not belong to the UC continuity, instead being exclusive to the strange multiverse of SD G-Generation. However, this is not the case for the Spirit Base, which like all the units of SD Gundam Lore are said to belong to the regular UC continuity, as claimed by the game, with the Spirit Base being described as a ship who served the Federation Navy for over 50 years. Considering the Spirit Base boards the Spirit Gundam, a variant of the new Gundam and so a mobile suit from the UC 90s, and features both the Spirit Tank and Spirit Jim, which use parts and technology from Victory-era mobile suits, this is actually plausible, making the Spirit Base one of the longer-lasting ships of the UC franchise, possibly reaching the 60 years of service. Now, that's all we have about the Spirit Base, and without wasting time, let's move to other juicy variants. Time for a more complex but more renowned variant. Meet the Admiral Tianem, a variation of the Ra Cailum-class introduced as the protagonist mothership in the Gundam F90 manga. A one-of-a-kind variant of the Cailum series, the Admiral Tianem was an experimental refitment of said class, specially modified to serve as an advanced mobile suit carrier. While the regular Ra Cailum was supposed to be the perfect middle ground between battleship and autonomous carrier, the Admiral Tianem refitment program aimed to make this variant less of a battleship and more of an autonomous carrier, in an attempt to create a more independent version of the already autonomous Ra Cailum. This decrease in focus as a battleship resulted in a lesser need for overall firepower, which resulted in the Admiral Tianem retaining only 3 out of the 5 primary twin megaparticle cannons of the Ra Cailum, scrapping the turret located under the bow and the one on the rear underside. Aside the loss of these two primary cannons, the Admiral Tianem also removed the 4 anti-air turrets located on its belly, bringing their overall number from 22 turrets to 18, which was on paper a downgrade, but in reality not a significant one since attacks rarely came from below. Now, as said before, the Admiral Tianem put a much more important emphasis on the autonomous carrier part, and for each of the downgrades detailed earlier, new features were included to improve it in other fields. First, the main diagonal launching ramps were completely overhauled, being now mounted sideways on the main ship structure, reducing their chances of being damaged by the enemy while drastically increasing the mobile suit launching capacity of the ship. The rear recovery deck was also completely changed, with the catapult being now mounted on a new upside-down launching ramp, increasing the defense of the catapult while protecting launching mobile suits from enemy fire. Now, this change in the rear launching ramp was also meant to support a big change in design applied to the Admiral Tianem, and which was supposed to drastically boost its role as an autonomous carrier. With autonomous carriers usually possessing extended cruising range and long-lasting operationality, changes were made to the Ra Cailum main engine configuration, with the number of boosters being brought from 8 to 10, thus increasing the cruising range and speed of the Admiral Tianem in comparison to the already impressive Ra Cailum. In the same vein, the removal of the bow underside turret enabled a complete overhaul of the entire lower bow structure, being rebuilt with a more roundish form, which contributed to better accelerations during long-lasting travels. All these things resulted in an autonomous carrier version of the Ra Cailum, less effective in fleet-to-fleet combat, but better suited as an independent mobile suit carrier. Similarly to how the Cailum-class General Revel was named after the renowned one-year war Lieutenant General Revel, the Admiral Tianem was named after the infamous Vice Admiral Tianem, second in command of the Earth Federation forces during Operation Chambello and the tactical genius behind the Federation victory at the Battle of Solomon. Once renamed, the new ship finally entered service, when exactly being not clear, but by UC-120, the ship was already several years old, and served at that time as the mothership of the two Gundam F-90s until the death of Unit 2 by Mars Zion, and subsequently, the start of the F-90 manga. When the Federation top brass launched a punitive expedition to Mars to retrieve the stolen F-90, the Admiral Tianem, under the command of Captain Novotny, was chosen as the flagship of the newly reformed 13 independent fleet, and sent to Mars alongside the remaining F-90 Unit 1. During the trips to Mars, the Admiral Tianem would serve as the mothership of the protagonists of the F-90 manga, until their arrival to Mars, where things started getting hotter. Attacked by squadrons of RF Asdams, the Admiral Tianem ended up being hijacked by onboard Marsian spies, who later used the ship's superior firepower to bring down other Federation ships of the expedition fleet. After the F-90 Unit 1 managed to escape on the Martian ground, forcing some of the hijackers to leave the ship, the Federation prisoners were able to take back control of the ship, and in a desperate attempt to secure victory, Captain Novotny ordered the ship to use its nuclear arsenal on Mars, even by crashing the ship itself if need be. However, before any decision could be made, Marzion finally fired its Olympus Mountain Royal Cannon, launching into space a giant molten rock directed at Earth. The Admiral Tianem, located directly on the firing path, was hit at full speed by the giant projectile, disappearing in a gigantic explosion. Ironically, the Admiral Tianem destruction would not be a useless sacrifice, as the detonation of its nuclear payload on the rock, which happened as it barely left Mars and thus had not yet started accelerating, resulted in the rock straying off course, and with the destruction of the Olympus base soon after, resulted in the rock never reaching the Earth sphere, foiling the all-mobile plan completely. In the end, the Admiral Tianem proved through its sacrifice to be as worthy as any past protagonist autonomous carrier, being sunk as a sacrifice for the safety of the Earth sphere. The Ra Cailum, the story of a one-of-a-kind ship which eventually reached limited production, founding a new class in the process. When this limited production first started is still unknown to this day, but many in Japanese media theorize it happened between the UC-100s and UC-110th, in parallel to the J-Gun normal type series rollout and reinforced class construction. These Ra Cailums were at 100% identical to their progenitor ship, with no loss in performance, but as the late UC progressed, modifications started being added to the design, with refitment programs spawning ships like the Admiral Tianem we presented earlier. In the late UC-110th, Vic Wellington eventually started adding modifications to the main line of Ra Cailums as well, something which culminated in the variant we are presenting now, the Ra Cailum Generation II. An unofficial variation of the Ra Cailum class, the Ra Cailum Generation II is a particular case, in the sense that while it has appeared in established animated materials, Sunrise has never bothered establishing it clearly, due to the fact that it originally appeared as a byproduct of negligence of the animation staff, which was later copied by graphic designers and caused the Ra Cailum Generation II to enter canon without any proper explanation. The second batch of these limited produced Ra Cailums, the Ra Cailum Generation II, is, as its name indicates, a second generation of Ra Cailums, featuring a relative modification of their arsenal and the inclusion of additional features to expand their tactical sphere. In terms of weapons, the Generation II remains rather similar to the original Cailum, retaining the exact same number of anti-air turrets, missiles launchers, and 5 primary double-barreled megaparticle cannons. Now, where the modification starts to show is in the form of the rear underside primary cannon, which has been replaced with a smaller version, trading firepower for cost efficiency in an area where the firepower would be lesser needed. However, the Generation II makes up for it with the addition of a nearby innovative weapon, a 9-tubes missiles launcher turret, a innovative weapon of the same grade that the main megaparticle cannons and which support a 360 degrees rotation, enabling the additional missiles volley capacity to be usable in any directions. Now about the additional features. While the average Ra Cailum possessed the ability to fire dummy balloons, decoy versions of itself meant to trick the enemy, the Generation II took the step even further, adding a decoy system capable of encasing the entire ship in a shaped asteroid balloon, enabling the ship to approach enemy locations stealthily. These features was inherited from the Alexandria class, which possessed a less effective version of the same dummy system. Aside that, not much else is known about the Generation II Cailum, aside that it apparently first saw widespread combat during the Cosmo-Babylonia War, with one of such ships, the Ragustar, being the first of the Ra Cailums introduced in the F-91 movie. Sadly, it is impossible to know for sure if the other two Cailums of the movie, the Ra Pro and the Moon Reinforcements Cailum, are also Generation II or just standard versions, due to the very few frames in which they appear. Yet, the Ra Cailum Generation II would neither be the last upgrade we've known for the Cailum, and seemingly neither a dead end, something I'm going to explain in the following part. If you follow this channel for long enough, then you might have stumbled upon the first video of the UC-shipyards, a 18 minutes little wonder covering the little brother of the Ra Cailum, the Club class. Among you, the ones who took the time to watch might remember the last covered variant, the Club refit, which is in few words the Club with a Minovsky craft shoving its ass and a beam shield slap on its bow, giving it atmospheric flight abilities and additional defenses. As we said in the past, as the late UC progressed, the Earth Federation forces started refitting their main warships, prominently the Clop and Salami Sky, to expand their tactical sphere and keep them relevant in modern battlefields. Now, as you might expect, the Ra Cailum, the main commander-used battleship of said forces, had to follow the same exact refitment pattern, which gave birth to the variant we are presenting now, the Ra Cailum refit. Like the other members of the refit class, the main addition to the Ra Cailum to become a refit version is the inclusion of a Minovsky craft system, mounted in the rear section of the ship. Like any Minovsky crafts, the version installed in the Ra Cailum refit scatters Minovsky particles around the ship, creating a high field as a byproduct of their interactions, which essentially result in the low gravity bubble surrounding the ship and repulsing the Earth's surface, enabling the Ra Cailum to float freely in the Earth's skies. This Minovsky craft expands the tactical sphere of the Ra Cailum, giving it the ability to operate in 1G environments or descend on Earth from space for continuous joint operations. Now, the Minovsky craft of the Ra Cailum is actually way more interesting than one could assume, with this ship Minovsky craft being the predecessor of the Minovsky craft using both the Salami Sky refit and Clop refit. Unlike standard Minovsky craft equipped ships like the Argama or the Pegasus class, which include the features from the start and are thus specially built to support it, the Ra Cailum refit make use of a craftable Minovsky craft, and thus become the first ship of UC not designed to use a Minovsky craft, which later gained one without having to modify the structural design. Giving out the Salami Sky and Clop refit make use of a smaller version of the same craftable Minovsky craft, it makes sense that the features was first tested on the Ra Cailum, then miniaturized to be included in the smaller light cruisers. The second features, the beam shield, is similar to the one used by the Clop refit, but is actually way more refined and streamlined than its light cruiser counterpart. While the Clop refit makes use of an external beam shield emitter fixed under the bow, the one used in the Ra Cailum refit is directly integrated in the bow, providing extra protection for the source of the beam defense, but also enabling the Ra Cailum to be able to use it as an offensive tool without the worry of damaging it. With this, the Ra Cailum refit is able to use the beam shield to ram enemy ships, notably by using the beam energy to burn enemy ship bridges by just passing over them, as seen in Victory Gundam. Aside this, well, nothing else is different than your average Cailum, with all the features and weapons remaining unchanged. The first ever created Ra Cailum refit is actually no other than the nameship of the class, the beloved original Ra Cailum, which started the refitment phase in the mid-UC-90s, gaining the craftable Minovsky craft as early as UC-96, but never the beam shield, as the ship was retired in the mid-late UC. Other Cailums later followed this trend, but with the complete refitment, notably the famous Jeanne d'Arc, who survived until UC-153, serving as the flagship of the Earth Federation Space Forces during the Battle of the Angel Halo of the Zarska War. An interesting thing to know is that in the case of the Jeanne d'Arc, the ship is depicted in the TV series as a regular Ra Cailum refit, but in the line art detailed material, the ship is shown to be actually a Generation 2 Cailum, with the rear missiles launching turret giving away its true nature. This would mean that the Ra Cailum refit is actually a loose class variant, mixing both regular Cailums and Generation 2 Cailums, all upgraded with Minovsky crafts and the beam shield. With this remark, we end our cover of the Cailum series, a fantastic ship with a fantastic line of duty. And we have now completed today's topic, and I hope you all like it. This will be all for today's video, but stay tuned for future lore content delivered on the same channel. Hit the like button and most importantly, comment and subscribe as it will really help the channel to flourish. So long fellow new types, until the time of our next special edition.